When did we start needing history? When did it stop being a part of a story that was one with the planet, that was one with nature? When did it become something that was laid down in facts and figures with no emotional connection, no connection to our hearts, and no connection to our environment? When did we start needing to explain what happened without holding it relative to nature, but relative to sequential events in time, rather than it being a part of a continuous cycle, rather than individuals being a continuation? When did they start needing to be individuals? Was it when we first saw that we were individuals? Or was it when we became isolated and individuality was forced upon us? Perhaps we hold individuality as being something that is good, only because we don't understand our connection. Now, when politics or when government tries to force a notion of identity upon us, force us into a place, rather than us feeling a part of that place, I think that's the wrong way as well. I don't think that nature forced us to be relative to it in the way we understood it. Of course, we had to adapt and survive and hold ourselves relative to it in a way, but I don't think it forced us. I think that our inherent nature was to hold ourselves relative to nature, to our environment. And it wasn't a great leap or great step forward when we were taken out of that equation through a new idea of identity. And identity comes with the development of something like city-states or nations. Walls played a big part, isolating communities from their environment. Now you might say walls keep, invaders out. Perhaps we became so numerous and we were violent enough and the resources were slim enough to where we had to start raiding from one another. But that happened even all the way back with Neanderthals. But I think when we started to develop technology to kill each other in more and more inventive ways, I think that's when our idea of history also changed, where battles and events and identifying us as these people, them as those people, this is our place, that is your place, this is my property, that is your property. I think that in our attempt to hold on to what we felt was ours, or perhaps that fear that we would lose something, I think that tied into our disconnect from a sense of identity at one with our environment and with nature. The Native Americans, when the Europeans first came to the Americas and the Isles off the coast of the Americas, the natives there had not needed to develop more and more sophisticated ways to kill each other, to hurt each other, to kill each other en masse. That happened in Europe and the East, even in a more dramatic way than it did in Africa. And certainly far more dramatic than it happened with the Native American peoples in the Americas. They had not needed to develop ways to kill each other en masse because they had held their relationship with their environment. The only reason it wasn't harder for the Europeans to take over the Americas is because I read that it was 90 to 98% of the Native Americans were killed by disease. That was, once again, the immunity of Europeans was built up in being in close together, in close contact, even with their livestock. Native Americans hadn't needed to build up those immunities either because those diseases had not developed. Now, Africa is an interesting note, though. In Africa, pandemics had gotten there quite often. And when the Europeans worked a lot of the Native American populations, for instance, in modern day Haiti and Saint Dominic, once disease had killed most of them and then they worked the rest to death, they brought in African slaves who had the immunities to the diseases that white people had. and they did not die as easily as Native Americans. And then a whole idea of race started to happen, and why black people are more suitable to being slaves, and this whole the culture around slavery developed because of these very minute but fundamental realities of the environment and what diseases and people were used to. But culture developed around the necessity. But the necessity to pump out more goods caused the culture to need to do that because it caused slavery. Pump out more goods, get a leg up on your European neighbors, in Portugal over Spain or France over England, something like that. The need and the dedication to capital, to money, caused the human compassion to not even enter into the equation. And a part of me wonders, did monotheistic religion cause this as well? Because for Hindus, for instance, is why I'm so impressed with Hinduism, is that everything could just be a part of, something else comes, you can be a part of, that can be a part of us. So when Christians first went to India and brought Christianity, a lot of Hindus are like, okay, Christ is just another God. I'm a Christian Hindu. I worship Christ on, here at this time, and then I worship Ganesh at this time. But then, the English were like, no, it can only be Christ. And then, of course, the commoditization and the intertwining of the church and money happened way before. And then Europeans duped themselves into subjugating their connection with the land, and they conquered themselves in a way. Of course, Christianity kind of conquered Northern Europe in a way that they just sent missionaries. But the best way to conquer people is to get them to conquer themselves. The greatest tool of an oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. If you oppress their hearts and minds, then their bodies are easy. The captivity forced upon them is easy. But I'm getting a little bit off track. So when did history start to become a necessity? This isn't something I have an answer for. But I think that it's a mistake to think that our idea of individuality, definitely influenced by culture and money over the centuries, I think it's a mistake to view individuality as superior to how Native Americans held themselves in relation to the land, to the earth, or Africans, or even Europeans far back when the Romans were conquering the Germanic peoples, for instance, are like, Woden, that's obviously Mercury. Tyr, that's obviously Mars. They tried to fit them into their cosmology. At that time, they could still accept, okay, you can have your gods, but this is who they actually are. But that cultural reductionism of somebody else's tradition started clearly as far back in classical history with the Romans against other pagan peoples around them. So if it wasn't paganism, because Romans were pagan, it must have been due to some idea about civilization, some idea of history and moving forward. So where did history start to happen or become a necessity? I think it's tied into individuality and our idea of it. And culture about individuality developed as the needs of capital progressed. Are we in human history, are we on a 10,000 year period where we've made decisions that have placed civilization itself on a terminal trajectory to where we're going to use up our planet, use up our environment, and use up our welcome to each other and each other's hearts? Where did history begin? Where did civilization begin? Where did the need of these ideas begin? I once heard this quote that stories are where memories go when they're forgotten. I think it's backwards. I think recording memories happen when we lose ourselves in context in the story. When we lose our identity intertwined with a symbiotic nature. You can have raids, you can have rape, pillaging before civilization started, quote unquote civilization, all the way back in, you could say, Sumeria. But conquest and civilization history, when we started losing our heart's connection to the story and nature, that's when we replaced it with conquest and a need for recording things, I think. Because there was a hole there. There was a hole of context that we needed to fill with a method of contextualizing everything. Where did history begin? At any rate, I hope you found this interesting. This was just a bunch of random thoughts I had tonight, or maybe over the past few days. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, shoot them down in the comment section below on YouTube. Once again, I did this right after lifting weights. I've been lifting weights quite a bit recently, so I just decided to pump out a video. I hope y'all like this. I'd like to hear y'all's ideas. Did I get it wrong? Am I thinking about it incorrectly? Am I missing something? What is your answer? Where did history begin? Feel free to hit that like button down there. It really helps out the channel. Feel free to leave a comment, as I said, and feel free to become a patron on Patreon at patreon.com/darkrealist, capital D, capital R. $1 a month, you can get access to all my YouTube videos, my podcasts, things I write, and ritual journal entries that I only share there. Once again, patreon.com/darkrealist, capital D, capital R. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you very much for listening to me ramble, and I hope all of you have a wonderful day.